Alright guys, I thought I'd shoot a quick video. Maybe something to younger guys getting into it. Cover some, little things. They don't teach everything in school, like relays. I'm going to show you how they work, what they do, but they don't really give you a lot of real world scenarios where you might want to use them. So I thought I would make this video today. We're in the shoulder season. The schedule's fairly light. The guys are working, we got 12, 13 guys. They're working there 7-8 hours a day right now, which is fine. So as far as loading up a bunch of service calls on my schedule, that doesn't usually happen. I'm the department supervisor, so I have office work to do. I go out and work with the guys on site, things like that. But once we get into the busy season, and then I'll start picking calls off the schedule, try to lighten up the load a little bit, help them get home at a better time, not work so late. So right now I wanted to cover the 9340 relay. Probably one of the most versatile parts you're going to have on your truck. These things are a tank, and I mean, there's so many things you can do with them. Now, this is just a drop in the bucket what I'm going to cover here. But there's situations where you roll up on units and you come across different types of blower controls that may not be working. You don't have any airflow, your heat pump, your air conditioning's not working, your heating's not working. This is going to cover more heat pumps than it will furnaces. We've got different types here. And once you learn how to convert these to this relay, there are other situations where you'll be able to kind of think, oh yeah, it wires up the same way, like the ICP products carry air handlers, that little square board they put in theirs to control their blower motors. It's going to kind of work similar to this one, but it's something I put together for them to have in their book out in the field. And if they run across one of these, they can quick reference it real quick. And each page will show the relay you may be looking at. On the back of that, how the wires are laid out on that relay, color coded exactly the same way best I can, how that relay looks, and how it will realign and rewire with this 9340 relay. And let me tell you, do not use this as a sequencer or a relay replacer for heat strips. Don't do it. Anyway, the Goodman, everybody's seen that before. That thing fails like you wouldn't believe. And the board that they replaced it with also does the exact same thing. It fails, it fries, it burns. I've seen this thing burnt slam in half a couple of times. So what I did was put together a little book for them to put in their price book in their truck, which most of our pricing is now on our CRM software, but they still have the books with reference material and things like that in it. They have this in it. So the first one I have is the one that you see in a lot of train air handlers from late 90s, maybe early 2000s, 2010, in that area. This is the one in the older model train air handlers. Kind of works the same way. I'll get to that one in a minute. So the first one is going to be the Train TDL relay control board that you see in a lot of air handlers. You get there, and most of these are going to be out of warranty anyway when you get to that air handler. So you have an option, is they can order the OEM control and it goes right back in the same way. Cost a little bit more, or you can give them a little bit better price and put this in. The only thing they're losing is their time delay on the blower off, and I've not found that to be a problem. Those older units like that, I mean, that's minimal efficiency anyway as far as the change is going to go. So I'm not really concerned. As many times as I've done this, that off delay on that blower motor has not been a problem. They appreciate getting heating and cooling. If they want the OEM part, fine, you can order it and put this in temporarily. But this is a lot of situations where maybe you have an older couple, they're elderly, maybe, and they're retired, upper 60s, 70s, 80s. It's hot outside or it's cold, they need that system to be running. You got a younger couple, maybe they've got some children in the house, kids, and you need to get them up and running, and this will do it every single time. And it's just a way to do it more professionally with what could be a permanent repair, and you're not jumping things out or cross wiring things or straight wiring things where the blower runs 24 hours a day in the summer, especially where I'm at. You're going to run the humidity up in the house. It's just going to be crazy. And you know, even if you don't have this relay, yes, that's an option to get that unit running until you can get a response for them. But most everybody's going to have this on their truck, so there's no reason why you can't go out and grab this, come in here and replace this control board and that blower relay control. This is how it lays out. I've got everything labeled the same way it's labeled on that board, and it's going to give you all the options you need. First of all, you've got your 24 volt. Now this is for this particular relay. This just powers the timer and the board. You don't need that anymore if you're going to put this relay in. And don't make fun of my drawing. I did the best I could. You can just simply unplug this one, cut the stake on off, stick a wire nut on it, and you're done with that wire. It tells you that right there. I give them the instructions. It's unused wire, tape it off, I prefer a wire nut. Then it lays out where every other wire is going to go on this board. We'll start with your commons. You've got 3 commons here. You got your common coming from your transformer. You got your common that goes back to your heat strips, and I'll explain that in a minute. You got your G from the thermostat. You got your common. So you get your call for your air handler blower. It's going to close this relay. It's going to have a time delay. But you got your common, which is your fan speed, and you got your line voltage in. Closes, blower comes on. With this relay, it's a double pole, double throw relay. So you have a switch here, and you have a switch across here. You got a normally closed, normally closed, normally open, normally open. With all these scenarios, in any scenario, your fan speed off your blower is always going to be your common terminal. So if you always remember to put your common fan speed terminal right there, your line voltage in to power that blower when this thing closes on the top right corner, everything else, I mean, you've won half the battle there, because you already know your low voltage is going to go here and here, which is going to be these 2 sets of terminals here that go to your low voltage coil on that relay. Right there and right there. My neighbor's cutting the grass. It's kind of funny. It looks like children in the corner over there. Kind of funny. He's on the 0-turn lawnmower, and the wife is, well, she's working the push lawnmower. So you go figure out how they fought that battle. Anyway, Trane, every system has a way set up that they want to make sure that you have airflow when your heat strips are on. I'll cover the other scenario in a minute, but with the older Trane air handlers, you can send 24 volts on your auxiliary heat to your contactor in those air handlers for the heat strips, but it's not going to close unless it gets a common. So what Trane does, American Standard 2, they power the motor across this switch when this relay is energized. This one they close and they prove common over to that contactor for the heat strips. So those heat strips and those Trane air handlers will not run unless this relay is closed to confirm we have airflow, and then it proves common to the blower. So that's typically how you're going to wire this one. You're going to run common here. You got your common coming in from your transformer, and you got your common that's going to go back to your thermostat wiring, and then you're going to put a common jumper here to this common pole on this switch, so that when it closes, it sends common to your heat contactor, and then the heat strips will work if your relay is closed and you have airflow. So I've got everything color coded for that relay, and then I show them exactly where those wires go on the replacement relay, which is this. And then this is what tells them to unused 24 volts, put a cap on it, wire nut. It's not used anymore, don't need it. The only purpose was to power that board. We don't have that board anymore, so we don't need that. We just need to power the blower, and we need to prove common to the contactor, and then that shows you how you can replace this relay in a pinch, this time delay control board for the blower and the train air handlers, with this 9340 relay. The older version of that was this relay, and then it was plugged to this board here and here, and it had an R terminal that would power the timer in that. You would get your call for G in common, then it would initiate that timer. Then that relay was actually wired the same as it is wired here, and it would turn on your blower and it would turn on your heat strips. Here's that wiring diagram. There's your 24 volts that powers that board that's plugged to the bottom of this relay. You get your call for G, that relay closes, powers the motor, proves common to your contactor. So it actually kind of wires the same way. You're just getting rid of that time delay board, which means in this situation, once again, the 24 volt wire, which is here, is no longer needed. You're just going to wire nut that and put it to the side. You don't need it anymore. So this is kind of the easier version, because you're just taking the board off the bottom of it. You're going to wire it back up the exact same way. You're just going to get rid of that 24 volts that you don't need anymore. Goodman, Amana air handlers, heat pumps, older ones that used this time delay sequencer for their blower. You had your low voltage on the bottom, your common. Your G would go over here, vice versa. Doesn't matter, as long as it's got a common and a G. Then you've got your thermal disc that eventually will warm up, pop, raise that rod in the center, and close the switch. Your blower speed was here, your common, because this is a normally closed switch between this terminal and that terminal. It's normally closed. Your line voltage in to power your blower would connect to there. So when that, if your heat strips were to come on, you have a back feed that comes in. You get a line of power here, energizes the blower comes on, you've got airflow with the heat strips running. If you get a call from the thermostat for regular heat pump or cooling operations, you just energize here with your low voltage, and then when that switch closes, it connects your common, which is your fan speed, over here to your line voltage in, and that powers the blower. This now opens, so you're not going to get a back feed to your heat strips, causing an amp draw on a bank of heat strips. The wiring diagram for that explains just that. That particular sequencer, this is normally closed. So in this situation, when these Goodman and Amanas, if your heat sequencer gets energized, it closes. When it closes, it's going to have a purple wire that comes off, back feeds a leg of power here. It's going to energize this normally closed switch for your blower speed, and your blower is going to run when the heat strips come on. In a normal operation for heat pump or cooling, you're going to get a common, and you're going to get a call for 24 volts on your G from the thermostat. It's going to energize this. That temperature thermal disc is eventually going to pop, and there's a little rod in there, plunger. It's going to pop that switch, and then it's going to open this terminal. Then it's going to close your fan speed to your line voltage, and you're going to have airflow for cooling and heating operations. Emergency heat, you're going to get your back feed to your normally closed here, and then it's going to energize. So what you would do to replace that sequencer with this relay, you're going to have your G on your low voltage, your common on your low voltage coil. This particular switch is not used because there's two switches on this relay. That's why I say double pole, double throw. You've got two switches on it, and you've got two poles, a common pole there and a common pole there. So when this energizes, this pole, which is going to be your fan speed there, is going to switch to your line voltage in here, and then that's going to power your blower during normal heat pump or cooling operations. If you call for emergency heat or you get a short, something that causes your heat sequencer to energize, when that heat sequencer closes, it's going to backfeed a line voltage to your normally closed switch on this relay, which is in turn going to turn on your blower to ensure that you have airflow. If your heat sequencers and your heat strips are running, you don't want those things running without airflow, obviously, that goes without saying. But Carrier does it a certain way, Train does it a certain way, Goodman does it a certain way. Train uses the second switch to just simply prove common over to your contactor in your air handler for your heat strips. Most everybody else in most situations is going to have a backfeed off of a heat sequencer, that when that heat sequencer closes, it's going to energize a bank of heat strips, but it's also going to send that power back over here to energize that blower to make sure there's airflow. So that's how you're going to wire that if you're replacing it to that. The next one is going to be the Goodman. The board they replaced this with, I mean, you find them burnt, you find them melted, but there is a fuse, so that's going to be a difference in this situation. So here is how that board is laid out. You got your relay. In this situation, you're going to have a common, and you're going to have a normally open and a normally closed. You're going to have your commons. You're going to have common in from the transformer. You're going to have your common that goes back to your bundle of wires that you tie your thermostat to. You're going to have your 24 volts R from your transformer. Then you're going to have your R feeding back to your controls that you'll tie your transformer to. You've got a fuse right there. Then you've got your G. It will have unused speed tap wires. Most of your motors will have a low, a medium, a high, maybe a low, medium, high, high. So you're going to have these M1 and M2 terminals. These are going to be basically your unused blower speeds. So in this situation, if your emergency heat calls, you energize a heat sequencer. When that heat sequencer closes, it'll energize a bank of heat strips. That will immediately send power back to your normally closed switch on your relay, energize your blower so you have airflow while your heat strips are running. If you get a call for G, it's going to close that relay. It's going to open the normally closed switch, close the normally open switch, and now your blower is going to be powered with your incoming line voltage. How would you replace that with this particular relay? First of all, it tells you right here, you're going to remove the fuse here off the board. You're going to take these two 24 volts from your transformer and your 24 volts out back to your controls and your thermostat. You're basically just going to disconnect those two, and then you're going to place that fuse in between them. Remove fuse and replace between your transformer R and your control R. If the fuse is not present, because some of these boards didn't come with a fuse, if the fuse is not present, simply install an inline fuse. Your unused fan speeds, which are here and here, if the board's not that badly damaged, you can leave them plugged to it and just leave the board in it. Or you can take these off, cut the stake-ons off the end of each one, and put a wire nut on each one. And that tells you how to handle your unused speed wires. There's Mr. Harley, next door neighbor. Then it's going to wire exactly the same way as the other diagram for that. Bring your blower speed to your common terminal. bring your line voltage in, this one, to your top right normally open terminal, and this is the one that's going to be your back feed from your heat strip sequencer. So if the heat strips call and that thing closes, it's going to energize the heat strips, and then it's going to come back here, energize your blower motor. If you get a call for G, that switch is going to close to here, open that circuit so you don't get power going back, energizing your heat coil. It's going to run the blower in normal heating and cooling operations. So this little relay can do a whole lot of things, and once you do these, and you get them wired up correctly, or you think you have them wired up correctly, the best way to troubleshoot what you've done is to simply take your meter and take your amp clamp, put it around one of your incoming line voltage wires coming into the air handler. Thermostat should be off, not calling. You're going to put your disconnect, or you turn your breaker back on, put your disconnect plug back in, and you're going to look for 0 amps. You're going to energize your blower at that point. You want to make sure when the blower comes on, the only amp draw you have is for your blower motor. Then you want to de-energize, make sure when the blower shuts off, your amps go back to 0. Then you want to energize your heat strips, and you want to confirm that when your heat strips energize, you've got it wired up properly, that the blower is running. You don't have amps, you don't have heat strips running without airflow. Then you want to de-energize your heat strips, auxiliary, emergency, however you want to call it, and then make sure that once that sequencer opens and that last bank of heat strips cuts off, when your blower shuts off, you no longer have any amp draw on your heat strips. That's the best way to troubleshoot it. If you put one of these in and you try this and you put your disconnect in or turn your breaker back on and the blower comes on immediately, well, you've got something wired wrong. Probably gonna have your line voltage in your heat strips backwards, normally closed. You put the breaker or the disconnect back and the blower comes on, you've ran your line voltage to the wrong place. And that's why I tell you, in all these scenarios, if you always put your blower speed off your blower motor on your top left common terminal, and you put your line voltage on your top right normally open terminal, you've already won half the battle. The rest of it is pretty simple to figure out. But if you put your disconnect in, turn your breaker back on, the blower comes on immediately, and there's no call on G, then you wired something backwards. Start over. If you put your disconnect in and you've got 18, 19, 25, 30 amps, whatever you've got, and you're pulling amps and your blower's not running, you've got something wired wrong. If you put your disconnect in and nothing's running, and then you energize G and the heat strips come on, you don't have any airflow, something is wired wrong. You want to be able to put your disconnect back in, breaker back on, 0 amps. Energize G, get airflow with no amps on your heat strips. De-energize G, blower shuts off, no amps. Energize auxiliary, heat strips come on, blower comes on. De-energize auxiliary in emergency, heat strip shut off, blower shuts off, 0 amps. And that's the key. You want to make sure that if you don't have a call on anything, there's no amp draw. Once you've done that, you've confirmed you've got it wired up right. So like I said, little things like this I do to try to help the guys out, because they don't teach stuff like this in school. I mean, they show you these boards. Like, I have a board set up at the shop, and it's got the light bulbs on it. I've got one for the blower, one for the heat strips, one for the compressor, one for the condenser fan motor, and I actually do have a reversing valve mounted to the board. And then I've got sequencers, relays, contactor, thermostat, transformer, and I basically just pull all the wires off of it, and you've got your controls, you've got your loads, and I have them wire that thing up and then cycle the thermostat through its operations, and to make sure everything comes on when it's supposed to be on, Everything's off when it's supposed to be off. No blown fuses, things like that. Nothing's cross-wired. Everything's hooked up with circuit breakers and protectors, things like that. So, and I'll bring the guys in about once a year and let them go through that board, wire it up. Would just basically start from scratch, wire that thing up with relays and controls, and you know, get the light bulb to come on, go off. Helps them out. And they do that in school, but they just don't show them scenarios where you're going to be out in the field and you may run into one of these parts that's not working. You're in a bad situation. It's snowing. It's 28 degrees outside. It's 98 degrees outside. The people in the house are old. They're retired. They're on oxygen. They've got infants in the house. And the only thing you know is OEM part. You know how these work, but nobody showed you how to cross-reference and try to use them to replace parts. And that's where some of these tech school training classes are lacking these days. They go through the basics, but they don't cover a few scenarios where you may need to replace this with that. Let me show you how to do it. You may need to replace this with that. Let me show you how to do it. And that's what they're missing, and they run into this stuff and they struggle, and then they order, oh, I had a train air handler and the time delay blower relay was bad, and I had to order one. They don't have any in stock, and it's going to take a week to get it. Okay, it's going to take a week to get it. Meantime, it's 95 degrees every day. It's 85 degrees at night every night. The people in the house are old and elderly. They need air conditioning or they need heat. This is something you can do. You got to be able to kind of figure out a way to get their system running in some of these situations. You can't do it in every situation. You got a variable speed blower, an X13 blower. Yeah, there's issues. But with some of these systems that use these controls, you really need to know how to get in there and replace these things in some situations and get these things up and running. If it's 60 degrees every day all week long and they want the OEM part, no, I'm not going to put that in there to get them temporary heating and cooling. But if it's in the middle of July and it's 94 degrees outside and they need air conditioning, I'll pop that in. If it's not under warranty, which most of these parts aren't going to be under warranty anymore, I'm going to give them the option of, hey, it's going to cost A for the OEM part, it's going to cost B for this one. It's a little bit less. They're on a tight budget. They're fixed income, retired, Social Security, things like that. And I'm not so concerned about losing that 30-second off delay on the blower. So anyway, that's just a little video I thought I would shoot on how to replace certain relays that control blower motors, because we're going into the summer and we see this probably 8, 9, 10 times a summer easily without a problem. And this is a way to get somebody some relief while they're waiting for a part, or maybe they can't afford the OEM part, and you can get that system running and operating properly and get them out of a jam. So anyway, guys, thought I'd shoot that quick video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for everybody that subscribed at this point. I appreciate it. And you guys enjoy your time off and your little break in the shoulder season, because we all know once May gets here, especially you get around Labor Day weekend, or is it Memorial Day? Memorial Day, I think, is first. And Labor Day weekend's in September. Once you get into Memorial Day weekend, it's game on pretty much at that point. So knowing little tricks like this can save you a lot of time and get you out of a bind. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.